so we're on to Tom, and Tom, I really am interested in your subject because I love innovation. I think all of us here on Passage to Profit love innovation. It's part of what makes the world an interesting place to live in. And I'm just kind of curious, what is innovation? Maybe you could define it for our audience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, in its very simplest sense, I think innovation is basically has to do three things. It needs to be something new, which is new to the world. It could be new to a company. It could be new to a country. It needs to bring some value to someone or something somewhere, and it needs to exist in real life. There's a big difference, I think, between ideas which rest in people's heads or rest in papers in people's drawers, and real innovation projects, which obviously are out in the world, either making money or adding value to someone somewhere. So I guess those three words, so new, value, and real.
Right. And I agree with you. I mean, innovation is great, but like I could dream up like the Star Trek, what was the device where you could transmit your body to some other place?
The transporter.
That's kind of innovative, but I don't think that's ever going to happen. Maybe.
Well, I'm not going to be the first one who tries it, I can tell you.
But what's interesting about, I mean, a lot of people say they're about innovation. What's interesting is that you're working with corporations, and I didn't think corporations were investing that much in innovation. And they used to a long time ago, but have they moved back to investing in innovation now?
So I think what's happening is, so as you said, we work a lot with some of the world's biggest sort of corporations, and they've always tried to deliver new products, new services, new businesses. And I'm not sure where that's kind of swinging to, but they're continuing to do that, and they're doing it as best as they can with all the challenges that there are in trying to exist and innovate in these big multinational corporations. So yeah, they're trying their hardest. They're doing a good job mostly.
Well, I mean, innovating in a big corporation is kind of difficult because you have to, in order to make it work in the markets that they work in, you have to put a lot on the line, and you have to make some pretty good guesses. And so their innovation tends to be more careful, right? They want to make sure that whatever they're going to invest millions of dollars in is got a reasonable chance of success, right? And
absolutely, and especially when they've got big brands, that they need to protect the reputation of, especially with your background in intellectual property, you'll know that the value of a brand is clearly massive. And so, taking any risk on the integrity or the strength of that brand is not something they would do lightly. So absolutely.
Right. So there's been a new class generated, a new term generated a few years ago called intrapreneur, right? So are you're familiar with that, right? So
yeah.
Are you encouraging people in these corporations to be entrepreneurs? Is that part of what you're doing?
I have to say, I'm not a massive fan of the term, if I'm really honest, because it's kind of a sort of a bit of a fake hybrid between entrepreneur and inside a company. And I think they're very different things. Some of the principles and methodologies can be the same, but at the end of the day, the way that an entrepreneur can make money and create value is very different in the end from how a large company can do it. The context is different. The way in which they pull it all together and make it happen is different. So I kind of try and keep those terms apart if I can.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. So,
well said.
Yeah. So what do you actually do with the companies when you go in there to help people be more innovative?
So for the first 4 years, the company's existed for 4 years now. And for that first 4 years, it was really about understanding what the big challenges were. Because in fact, my life before that, just going to go back on the backstory. So I spent 18 years actually working in big companies, big corporates, managing big brands, doing innovation projects and things. And I left there actually because I realized there was such a great opportunity to help these companies to do it better. So that's when I originally set up the company. And so what we're doing now is really to try and bring the best help that we possibly can for people who were in my shoes 4 years ago. So what it is, it's often about short, sharp, interventions that deliver results in really short spaces of time. So whereas a lot of our competitors who are the big consultancies are doing projects 3, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, we break it down into little chunks and we sell little bits of help that move it forward from A to B and then come out and then go in for the next chunk. And we're doing that a lot more now through digital. So that's really where the company's going, to make sure that the impact we can have is global and scalable as we move into the next 4 to 5 year horizon.
So what are the top 3 innovation factors to master? I mean, if you're an entrepreneur and really, I want to be more innovative. Everybody does. And so what do we need to do to get there?
Okay, number 1, which should be the easiest one, but it's so tough, is actually to spend time and listen to your customers or your potential customers. Because what happens in the innovation world and also in the entrepreneurship world is people get really obsessed with an idea, with a solution, and they can spend a lot of time and money developing it, whilst forgetting that the only reason that someone would actually buy that is if it solves their problem or it brings them some kind of joy or value or emotion or what have you. So definitely tip number 1 would be spend time with, understand, go as deep as you can with people that you're trying to attract and you're trying to serve. So that would definitely be number 1. Number 2, number 2 would probably be to create lots of different solutions rather than just getting obsessed about one of them. So really trying to find lots of different ways in which you can solve the problem in order that you don't get really kind of blinkered on just one solution in case that doesn't work, because quite often one solution won't work. And so hedge your bets, if you like, by looking at multiple solutions in parallel. And then number 3 would be definitely adopt a sort of test and learn mindset. So, the startup community is pretty good at this, getting out there with rough early prototypes, models, landing pages, all of that kind of stuff to be able to test whether or not it's doing something right. But in the corporate side, it's not quite embedded yet in the way that they're working. So definitely everything about quick test and learn in order to optimize what it is that you're working on. Those would be my 3.
And what would be some of the mistakes that people make when it comes to innovation?
Oh, wow. Probably the opposite of what I've just said.
Really?
That was an innovative answer.
So like identifying an idea and zeroing in on it and shutting out the rest of the world, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of sort of when people start making a lot of decisions themselves about an idea, that's when you kind of sends red warning signs. If they're deciding, well, I like it like this, or I think it should be like this, that sends big warning signs. You think, go and speak to your customer, get their opinion, because they're the only ones at the end that count.
So this is hard in corporations because there's a lot of rivalry among people. So what do you do with the not invented in my backyard, so I'm not going to take a look at this? What do you do with that?
I think that its most basic level, what we do and what we need to do is to get people talking and collaborating across different teams, breaking down silos, trying to get people who, you can never launch an innovation project with one person or one function. And so what you really need to do is to pull together this diverse group of people and capitalize on the strengths of all of them, rather than it just be one team or one department. So quite a lot of the job that we need to do is to bring those people together and get them talking the same language and also get them pointing in the same direction. Because if that doesn't happen, it's highly unlikely that the project will actually happen and it'll work. So,
well, I do have to say, Kenya works in a corporation and she is incredibly innovative and creative. So Kenya, do you have any comments or questions?
Thank you for that, Elizabeth. I guess, how do you avoid like innovation burnout, right? Because I feel like sometimes when you come with like a spirit of creativity, it's it's exhausting sometimes, especially when you're working for a large corporation. And I'm assuming that it helps to have a team around you that kind of lifts the load.
Yeah, so absolutely. And from my perspective, it's actually quite a serious problem that doesn't get talked about that much. But, being an innovator in a large company is super tough. It's probably one of the hardest jobs within a corporation because every single day you're trying to change stuff. You're trying to change the way that things are done. You're trying to change the products that the company sells. You're trying to change the way in which the company works together. And so you're pushing all the time against sometimes a sort of a megalith that's been there for hundreds of years. And it is super tiring. I definitely agree with you on that, Kenya. So I think having a team around you is definitely a key success factor. I think the second thing is one thing I found personally really useful when I was on the client side was to have a coach, actually, someone who's external to the company, who has some of that expertise, who has been in that position, who can just give you a sense of perspective and guide you a little bit in how to navigate some of those more tricky situations. And that's what I had when I was in that position, and it really helped me. So I think a team definitely to share the load, and then someone externally who can coach you, who can mentor you, who can support you as you make your way through those projects.
Wow, that's amazing advice, and it sounds like good advice, because lots of times you don't know what you don't know, right? And so
Exactly.
having somebody who knows what you don't know and then tell you what you don't know, so then you know it, is pretty helpful, right?
Can you say that real fast? Well, I think coaches are kind of your advocate too, right? So yeah, if somebody's pushing against what you're trying to do, your coach can help you push back, right?
And also to keep a sense of perspective, because it's quite easy, whether on the entrepreneur side or on the corporate side, and I've known both of them, to get pretty obsessed with what it is that you're doing. It becomes your life, really, even if you've got a great personal life and a great family life, as I have as well. But you sometimes get a bit too obsessed with making it work. And I think having someone who can sort of pull you outside of that and really help you to realize that maybe it's not quite as important as you think, and the problem isn't quite as difficult to solve as you think is a really nice thing to have.
So, Tom, do you think that every single person has it in them to be innovative?
Absolutely, without exception. So it's simply because, and I think this is a really quite often misunderstood, people often think they're sort of creative or they're not creative. And it's a little bit true. I think everyone can be creative, but there are probably some people who are more naturally creative than others. But innovation is quite different in the fact that, creativity is just one small part of it. And the rest of it is really process. I hate to kill the myth, but, at the end of the day, it's not really about visionary people who necessarily want to change the world with billions of dollars. This stuff is a bit like a sausage machine. If you put great inputs in and you follow great process, you get great stuff out. And so you don't have to be some kind of genius or exceptional person to be able to run that process if you master it really well. So yeah, I do think that everyone can contribute to and also lead innovation in an effective way.
I've always thought that entrepreneurism is innovation executing on creativity, right? So that you really, when you're in the entrepreneurial space, you have to be creative, you have to be innovative. You also have courage. So it could also be courage executing on creativity. And those are all of the kind of the basic pieces of the innovation and the entrepreneurial mindset. But it's the execution piece, right, that you're talking about when you're talking about process. So how do you unpack that and get to a point where the execution piece starts happening?
To be honest, I think you're absolutely right. the execution piece is the absolute hardest part of this whole thing. Simply because it's, let's be honest, it's quite easy to have ideas, and it's quite easy actually to have good ideas. But the key difference between either the entrepreneurs or the companies who are really high performing on kind of innovation and business performance are the ones that take action. They're the ones that say, we're going to do it, we're going to launch it, we're going to take that risk, we're going to invest in it. And okay, it may not work every time, but at least we'll learn something and we won't have any regrets that we didn't do it. So I think in terms of how to do it, one of the key things is really about just making sure you're clear on who you expect to buy your product or service, and who are the very first people, who are those early users who you can test with, you can learn from, they can become your advocates, and therefore you can tweak and optimize little things before you put it to more of a mass general market. And I think if you identify those people really well, it can really help you in terms of the strong execution afterwards.
Right. And do you feel, you're talking about developing these, whatever the project is, do you feel that innovation spurs innovation? Because sometimes it feels that way, right?
Absolutely. And it plays a massive part in culture, whether it's a culture of a startup or culture in a big company. As soon as you get people behaving in an innovative way, and definitely as soon as people start seeing results, like tangible results from innovation projects, it just breeds this culture, which really helps to support that and really helps that to grow within that startup or that organization. So absolutely 100% agree with you.
That's great. Well, we've come to the end of the segment. I just want to say thanks, Tom. This has been a fascinating discussion, and I hope you'll stay with us for the rest of the show.
Of course.
And
my pleasure.
We'll be back right after this. You're listening to Passage to Profit on WOR 710, the voice of trademarked New York.
That's a good one.